Now let's work on adding notifications to our public channels. When we're in one channel, let's see that other messages are added to a channel that we're not on. We'll begin by going to our channels component, and we'll first create a property and state called channel initially set to null. We'll also create a messages ref referencing our messages collection, as well as a notifications property set to an empty array. We'll head down to change channel, and with the channel that's being passed in, we're going to set the state and update the channel value that we just created. We'll execute a new function within our add listeners function that'll take the ID of every channel that's added to the channels ref with snap.key. So this function will be called add notification listener. It'll accept snap.key as channel ID. This will allow us to take the messages ref, put channel ID as a child on it, and listen for any value changes, meaning listen for any new messages added to any of our channels. And if we have a value for that channel property within state that we just created, if the user has changed the channel they're on, we want to show them the number of messages that are new in the other channels that they're not on. By executing this function, handle notifications, it will take the channel ID, the ID of the channel in state, the notifications array in state, and the entire snap. So now in creating this handle notifications function, we'll call these parameters channel ID, the current channel ID, the one stored in state, notifications, and snap. We'll first create this last total variable, set it equal to 0, then we'll iterate over the notifications array that we're getting from state. We'll use find index to do so. We want to find the index value for an array element within the notifications array which has an ID property that's equal to channel ID. So we want to see if we have any information about a given channel. So if we don't, if the index is equal to -1 from find index, we want to push a new array element onto our notifications array. This will be an object which will first contain an ID property set to channel ID, a total value set to snap.numChildren to get the total number of messages for a given channel, last known total with the same value, and a count property set initially to 0 but which will update to get our final total of notifications. So now if we do have an index value for a given channel, we want to make sure it's not equal to the current channel ID, and now we'll update the last total value using the total value from the given array element. Then we'll get the most recent number of messages for a given channel with snap.numChildren subtracted by the last total, and if it's greater than 0, if there is a new message or multiple messages added to a given channel, we're going to update the count property for a given element with snap.numChildren minus last total. So that should be the number of new messages for a given channel. And then at the very end, we'll update the last known total with snap.numChildren. And finally, when the message listener has been executed after firing off a message, when we've run our conditional, we want to update the notifications array in state. So we'll save that, head back to our app, and test this out. First, we need to make sure that we switch to a different channel so that we have a channel value within our state. Remember that our handle notifications function will only run if we have a non-null value for our channel within state by switching to another channel. So we'll navigate to the channels component, then DevTools, take a look at the notifications array, and if we add a new message to this second channel, you can see a new element was added to the array, an object with the properties total, last known total, the ID of the channel, as well as the count. And the count is set to 0 since the current channel ID and the channel ID are the same. We're not going to see any notifications since we're on that same channel and we added the message ourselves. Now when we change the channel that we're on, we want to execute a function called clear notifications. And clear notifications will remove any notifications that we're getting for a channel that we're currently on. If we see that there are new messages and we take a look at those messages, obviously we don't want to be notified about them anymore. So we'll once again take the notifications array, iterate over it using findIndex method. We'll check to see if there's an ID property whose value is equal to the channel that we have stored in state, its ID value. And if it finds a positive index number for it, if it's not equal to -1, we're going to copy the notifications array in state and set it equal to a variable updated notifications. And we'll use the array spread operator in order to copy that array. So we'll take updated notifications and select an element based on its index, grab its total value of notifications, and we want to update this. We want to update it by taking the notifications array in state, selecting an element based on the index value that we found, and updating it with the last known total value. And then we want to take the count property and set that equal to 0. Then finally we want to set the notifications array in state with our new updated notifications variable. Now that we've done all this work for getting the count of new messages on other channels, we want to display it. So we'll do that within display channels, where we'll execute a function called getNotificationCount. It'll take the channel that's being iterated over, and if the value returned is true or truthy, we're going to display a label component from Semantic UI with the color red, and within it we'll interpolate the number of new messages with getNotificationCount, once again passing in the channel. So we'll make sure to bring in the label component from Semantic UI, and we'll create this new function. So getNotificationCount takes the channel it's being iterated over. We'll create a count variable set initially to 0. We'll take the notifications array in state, and we'll use a for each to iterate over it. So for each notification element, we want to check to see, first of all, if the ID on the element is equal to channel.id. If so, we'll update the count variable with the count property on the notification element. And lastly, we want to check to make sure that the count number is greater than 0. If so, we'll return that number and display that as the number of new messages within this label component next to our channel. So we'll save all that, and optionally, if we want to get notifications about new messages added to other channels without having to first switch the channel, we can, within the setFirstChannel function, set the channel property on state to first channel. Then within my terminal, I'm going to deploy my app with the now CLI to test this out. And once it's been deployed, I'm going to paste the deployed URL that I get into a new tab and bring it to the side so I can log in with a different user and test out our notification functionality. So I'll switch to the React channel, type in a new message. Once I hit add reply, you can see the notification for one new message added to the React channel for my first user. If I type in and add another message, you can see that's updated to 2. And in the dev server, if I add a reply, you can see that a notification is added to the deployed URL. And if we visit both of these channels, we can see that the count of new messages is cleared out when we visit it.